Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This time on Careers in Discovery, I'm with Lars van der Veen, co-founder and chief scientific officer of iOnctura. After nearly 2 decades in big pharma, Lars made the leap to entrepreneurship when he founded the company with his co-founders. And in this episode, we talk about his journey from medicinal chemist to CSO, the lessons he's learned building a company from scratch, and why taking the leap into biotech offered him the chance to have real impact. This time on Careers in Discovery, I am joined by Lars van der Veen of iOnctura. Lars, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I want to start by talking about iOnctura, of course. And this is a company that you founded going back sort of 7-8 years now. I love the tagline, small molecules, big impact. I love this idea of low disruption therapies, but maybe you could tell us a bit more about all of that and what you're working on there.
Yeah, so maybe, to start. So we started iOnctura, me and my co-founder, Catherine Pickering, the CEO. We started iOnctura actually with the idea originally to come up with good molecules that you could combine with immunotherapy to further drive these responses that the people were seeing with these immunotherapies. And what we recognized early on already is that actually, if you really want to contribute to better therapies, you need to make sure you have safe therapies. So we're not interested only in extending survival of those patients, but that prolonged survival should go hand in hand with quality of life. Mm-hmm. So actually, that is a little bit the ethos of the company, to find very safe and selective molecules that actually target the crosstalk between the tumor and the stroma. And therefore having some kind of a two-pronged approach towards cancer, not only targeting the tumor itself, but actually also the supporting cells around it. Because we think by doing that, probably you can better target the tumor as a whole and prevent the tumor for escaping. What you see with a lot of targeted therapies, as soon as you target a certain mutation in a cancer, the cancer will just develop a new mutation and become resistant to your therapy. So we hope actually by targeting the tumour-stromal crosstalk, actually you might prevent also the tumor from finding easy ways to escape from your therapy.
Interesting, which probably means shorter treatment cycles and less recurring tumors and things like that, I would suspect.
Yeah. So in the end, of course, we hope to keep the tumor better in check and maybe turn the cancer in a more chronic type of disease. And while maintaining a high quality of life for the patient.
No, and I think that this is a really important point, that most cancer companies just focus on the cancer, but of course, cancer treatment can be pretty rough, right, for the patient.
Exactly.
It's probably better than just not treating the cancer, but it's
well, for some therapies you might actually argue. So if you have some of those chemos and see what kind of side effects people are going through, they need to spend most of the day on the toilet, or then you can actually argue, what's the value of this 2-3 additional months you're giving these patients if those months are pretty miserable. So therefore, really, our focus is try to come up with very safe, meaning very selective therapies, of course, that still need to be very effective.
Yes.
Right? But so still helping to keep the tumor in check, but actually preventing that the patients are suffering maybe more from side effects.
Yes.
Than actually from the cancer itself.
Yeah, and your view is looking at how the tumor interacts with the environment rather than the tumor itself is the way to do that. Yeah, makes sense. So this will have changed over the last 7-8 years, I'm sure, quite a lot. But today, as the Chief Scientific Officer, where's your attention? What are you focusing on? Where do you spend most of your time, Lars?
Yeah, so I think it has been quite a transformative period the last 7 years. So we started with just a basket of preclinical assets, which we then managed to bring into the clinic. And now our lead program is just recently going into a multiple of phase 2 trials. So it will be a very transformative year again ahead of us. And maybe what people should realize, if you start a biotech or join a smaller company, actually you wear a lot of different hats. Certainly in the earlier phases, and as the company grows, you might lose a couple of those hats because you find other people to take care of that. But so as a Chief Scientific Officer at the moment, I still wear a couple of hats. So as my background is in medicinal chemistry, I'm also more or less the chemist in the company. So I take also care of all the production of our drugs, and also the manufacturing development of the drugs. On top of also steering now the research and also translational science activities of the company. Because, of course, if you have very selective molecules, you also need to be very selective in the patient populations you want to treat with your molecules. And therefore, I think we are very biomarker focused. So big focus for us is really identify those patient populations that have the highest likelihood to benefit from treatment, and then enrich our clinical trials and our clinical development for targeting those patients.
Yeah, I see. So there's kind of quite a broad view that you have of the development cycle at the moment.
Yes, exactly. So and actually that is one of the advantages of a small biotech company, right? You have you oversee a very broad spectrum of activities. Of course, you need to be comfortable by being uncomfortable in a lot of areas. But I think if you have a good set of brains, good analytical skills, there's a lot of things you can learn along the way, and you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes either, right? So from some mistakes you learn a lot, and you can do other things much better. Absolutely.
And then I'll come back to the founding of the company and sort of the journey that you've been on with it. We'll talk about that a bit more as we go through. But I guess going back to the early parts of your career, Lars, you mentioned that you're a medicinal chemist by training. Why chemistry? And at what point did chemistry become drug development for you? Because, of course, there's so many different ways you can go as a chemist, right?
Yeah, no, correct. And I think part of it was by what was conscious. Part of this was, of course, unconscious as well. Yeah. But I think if I look back, I was always very interested in experimenting. So I was experimenting also when I was in high school. So for me, it was quite clear that after my high school, I would want to do something in the sciences. Yes. Then also I wasn't too great in math, right? So that made sure that probably physics was probably would not be the wisest choice. And then again, for me, it was more about should it be medicine, chemistry, or biology? And in the end, I choose chemistry. Probably because I was not too interested at that time of working too much with people. So then medicine drops off. And then biology for me was also a little bit too much with plants and other things. So I ended with chemistry. And I thought it was more or less for me, it was not that this was definitely what I wanted to do, but it was more or less, this is probably what would fit me best.
Yeah.
And actually, I haven't had any regrets about it, actually, because I think what I learned during my studies, I think what I really like about chemistry is you're making new things, right? So you can make molecules that never existed before, that have properties you would never dreamt of. And I think this is what I learned, especially when I was doing organic chemistry. So actually, my master project dramatically failed. But in the end, so I had to make a molecule that could not exist, I think. But along the way, actually, by chance I made a kind of a very colored compound, deeply red color that never existed before. And I saw this also as a kind of accomplishment. So I think it was very proud at least. Right, that you can make novel molecules with novel properties, and so on. And actually that has then also set me on a course actually to go into the pharmaceutical industry. Actually, I was also considering maybe going into the more hardcore science or hardcore chemistry.
Yeah.
But in the end, I ended up at the pharmaceutical company also because. I really thought about if you could make molecules that would treat diseases, right? That would be really cool. Actually, that's what I thought. So that's why I started in the pharmaceutical industry, and I started more or less at the very early stage of discovery. First by making. At the time, it was very in to do combinatorial chemistry, making a lot of libraries of compounds. So I started with that, and then slowly moved up to In the end, in my career, actually, what I've been doing is getting closer and closer, actually, to the patient you want to treat with your drugs. So I think that's more or less what happened along the journey.
Fair enough. And there's something you said there that I think is really interesting because my memories of chemistry going back to school, not even university, but going back to school is periodic tables and covalent bonds and things like that. And nobody really, maybe they did and I didn't pay attention, but nobody really said what you just said, which is that actually, if you get really good at this, what you end up doing is making things that have never existed in the history of the world before. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, and I think, that's where probably chemistry could be taught a little bit more inspiring in school, because actually this is what chemists do, right?
Yeah.
Every day, right? Every new plastic, every new drug, every new, and anything you can imagine, there's always chemistry in it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think it's true of probably all the sciences, right? I think like you said about biology wasn't for you because you weren't that interested in plants. Like, I didn't see the point in learning about photosynthesis. That was a similar thing to you. But then, of course, you dive under the surface of these things and you're involved in this every day, of course. But there's fascinating things lying under those basic principles. And I get the point of starting with basic principles so that children understand.
That was more or less I would say by chance, but actually it was maybe also a good point to start. Although in my first job, so I started on a temporary contract at Solvay Pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
Making these libraries, but what I lacked there, so I was making a lot of molecules, right, hundreds of molecules, but I never saw what they were doing. So and that was a little bit disappointing. So then when I heard that Solvay wasn't doing good, they were announcing a reorganization. So I took my chances and said, I better look for another job, but also that job should bring me again closer to project work. And I think that's what I really like, is working in projects, because they're actually, right, you have a goal as a project, you work together and you make molecules, right, that first of all, right, you want to see activity in cellular systems, then you end up doing it in animal models, unfortunately still, although we are getting away from that more and more, but we can still not avoid doing animal studies, and then in the end it should result in something that could treat a human in the end. So for me it was also very important. That's maybe also why I didn't decide for an academic career. I wanted to see results of what I was doing, right? I wanted to be very close to some kind of impact. And then if you just work in science for the sciences, I think it's great, right? But for me, it was also, I wanted to see impact, right, of what I was doing.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot from people about why they moved into the industry side of science. And, one of the things I noticed about your career, Lars, was that you sort of progressively worked for bigger and bigger companies, right? Including Boehringer, Merck, really large companies. I suppose, my question is, any advice for people who are impact driven but are working in these huge organizations to sort of stay connected to the impact of the work they're doing?
I think what is really great of working in bigger companies like Merck, Boehringer Ingelheim, also Organon at the days is actually you can learn a lot in these companies.
Yes.
Right? So you can really become an expert in different fields. Typically, these companies also have very good HR training schedule, so you can take courses. So actually, also at Organon, I was very happy that I could get some of these courses where you also better learn yourself.
Yes,
you learn to be a better manager in the lab and these kind of things. So really, it helped me really build me as a professional. And then again, in all those companies, you have so much opportunities to start other things, to look over the borders of what you're doing. Which, on the other hand, is then also for me is at some point you need to make a decision in a bigger company, right? Am I able to make a career in this company that puts me on a path that I like, right? Or am I getting kind of stuck in the organization and do I need to fit in a certain job role, certain function, which you can be very happy with. So do I want to be the best medicinal chemist ever, right? Then probably you can find such a job in a big pharma company. But if you want to do a little bit more, then actually, and that's what I would advise people, even if you want to start working for smaller companies, actually working in a bigger company for a couple of years, you can learn a lot of skills, a lot of tricks. You can understand the field very well.
Yes.
And actually, if you then move to a smaller company, you bring a lot of expertise and skills to that company. And I think then in that smaller company, you can have a big impact, because the challenge with smaller companies is that you are filling several roles typically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to have a little bit broader background, a little bit more experience will help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think the great thing about big companies is they've already figured out how to do a lot of the hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you can then soak that up and see what it should be done like. And then, if you've never worked in a company, or you've only ever worked in startups, you're kind of having to figure out everything yourself, right? Whereas you can leverage this expertise of thousands of brilliant people, like some of the best scientists in the world in some of these companies, right? So I think it's really important.
And maybe to add on that, although it's becoming less than it used to be, there is a little bit more job security if you work for a bigger company, and certainly if you are in your early stages of your career, that can be helpful. So for me, it was also one of the reasons not to go for a postdoc position. So I was recently married, I had a small kid, right? And then I thought, I also need to provide for my family, right? So I better get a real job than being a postdoc. So that was also one of the reasons. Besides trying to have a bit more impact on what I was doing.
Yes, fair enough. So as you've said, after your PhD, you spent the next sort of 17, 18 years in relatively big companies, some of them very big. And kind of increasingly moving up the ladder, moving into larger organizations, moving over into project management, alliance management, some of the broader functions, I guess, alongside the scientific roles. And then it looks like, just looking at your path, there was an itch you needed to scratch, or there was something.
Well, I think after you've worked, as you say, right, for more than 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry, you also see a lot of the downsides of bigger companies. So there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of committees to go through it. So decision making gets very slow. And then if you are ambitious and you want to see results, right, then at some point you're getting a little bit, I would say, fed up with that. And you want to see if you can, again, increase the impact you're having. And then when my partner, Catherine Pickering, came to me and said, I have this idea of starting a company. Yeah. And I said, well, if anything, right, then in that company, as one of the founders and as one of the executive members, I'm actually at the steering wheel myself, right?
Absolutely,
So now I can see if I can make impact, and if I succeed or if I not succeed, right? There's only one to blame, and that's myself, right?
yes.
To the biggest extent. So I think that for me, so after 15 years in pharma, I said, well, let's take our chances ourselves and see,
Yep.
can we be successful also as a company. I must admit, we didn't know what we were getting into, right? But I think we learned along the way. And of course, also in biotech, it's not all is brilliant either. I think one of the disadvantages of biotech is, of course, because you don't have products on the market yet.
Yes.
You are always looking for money, right? So, and then again, you are still talking to people. You need to convince them to pay money. So you're still reliant a lot on the external world. But at least when you have the money, right, there's a lot of freedom how you can how you can operate, right, under the promises you've made, of course, to your investors, what you're going to deliver. But I think, right, there's a lot of trust typically from investors in the team, and you can accomplish a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched on something there that I always think about, is that you have to have a certain amount of naivety to start a company, because
otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. There was I don't know if you saw this. I might have referenced this on the podcast before, but there was an interview with Jensen Huang at NVIDIA recently, and they asked him something like, "So Jensen, if you did this again, what would you do differently?" And he just said, "Do this again? I would never do this again."
No, I might. So let's see when we get there. I think, of course, in biotech, we're all hoping that at some point, right, we have a very successful product, and then, of course, bigger companies cannot avoid, right, talking to you or maybe working with you, or in the long run maybe take over the business. You never know what's going to happen, and you might have a chance to start again. Yes, but I will have to sit then and see what I will do. Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a lot of maybe that's another thing. I think there's so much you learn on doing this. There's so much you can then actually help others if they have the same plans. So maybe that could also be a nice role to fill, is actually be a mentor or a coach in helping others that have similar plans.
Yeah. I get the sense as well that it's maybe a little bit like what women go through after childbirth, in that they forget how painful it was, otherwise they'd never do it again. So I think it's probably the same with entrepreneurs.
It's probably very similar. And nothing to disrespect women giving birth, because I think as men we cannot we cannot judge on that. Yeah.
But I am interested in those early moments of companies. I think it's really fascinating. So you said Catherine came to you with an idea. I'm assuming you knew each other already.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, it was actually quite interesting, because Catherine was working in the business development department of Merck, and I was in the alliance management. And typically, right, we would work on each other's projects. So we actually had a lot of intense interactions, because then typically. Alliance management was always blamed if some of the good partnerships that were closed by business development were then not resulting in what everybody hoped to do, and us in alliance management always blamed business development to giving us partnerships that were hopeless or whatever. But I think in that interaction, I think the good thing was we got to know each other pretty good, also because we were very open to each other and had already had our rows. And I think that's very important, because if you start a company together, you need to know exactly who you're working with, and I think we complemented each other very well in our capabilities, and that's I think key for building a successful company, building a successful team. So I think that's something, and Catherine is very good in that, actually, also in the rest of our management team, to really select people that really complement us, rather than finding somebody that's is similar to us. Because I think if if you want to build a good team, you need to find all different types of people, and everybody should complement, because everybody brings something unique to the table, which makes the team better.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I think it's, if you can have those, we sort of think of them as spiky individuals. I don't mean in terms of like they're difficult. I mean in terms of they are very strong in some areas and not so strong in others. But then you put them all together and you end up with this whole that's very, very strong all round. And I think that's a good way to build a team. Yeah, it takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of looking in the mirror. But yeah, if you can do that, that's the right way to go. So you knew the relationship was there. As you say, you'd had your disagreements, which I agree is absolutely critical. There's a bit of a gap between there's this interesting idea and let's start a company. So tell us about when that tipped over. What the sort of. So
for me, it also came at the right time. So I was again, and I think that was more or less I was 5-6 years at Merck, and I think if I can give. People starting their career and advice, actually 5-6 years is a good time to reflect, right? Am I happy what I'm doing? Do I see progress? Can I still grow in the function I have? Do I need to find something else? Because you're reaching the maximum at your of your learning curve, right? In the function you have. So after 5-6 years, you should reflect and see, is this what I want for the next 5 years or not? So for me, it came at a point where I was thinking, what's next? And then actually before I never really thought about starting a business until Catherine started with it. But then she needed a molecule to go with the business. So we needed to discuss with Merck to get a license to that molecule. And actually I was appointed by Merck actually to help her extract that molecule from Merck. And by doing that, actually I advised her which molecule to take as well, because this was one of the molecules I worked on as a project manager. And I knew this was a very good molecule. So this ended up being our lead program now in the clinic. So I saw a lot of potential there. And I saw that this potential wasn't used. So for me, it was a combination of, this molecule deserves a better chance. And what better chance could we give it than do it ourselves? Yeah. So it more or less came a little bit as good timing. And then I had the advantage. So my kids were already in university. So I could take a little bit of chance also on the personal side. If things wouldn't work out, I wouldn't be too afraid. So for me, the timing was just right, to make the jump and then and see what would happen.
Yeah, and it's something we've talked a couple of times to people about on the podcast is it helps to be in the right personal space to take these things on, right? Because it's so all-consuming and so demanding, especially at the beginning.
I fully agree. Because these are very intensive times. You live and dream the company, right? More or less. So you need to get all in. I think we were very happy that we were also seed funded by Ventures, so they were very supportive. Yes. So we got, and very important as well, actually, we started also with a strong collaboration with Cancer Research UK, now called Cancer Research Horizons. Yes. That gave us a kind of a flying start. And that was very helpful because they were actually operating more or less as our wet lab facilities. So we could have a running start, and it really helped. So we didn't need to build up our own. So what we brought in was our intellect, right, and our skills, and we could outsource a lot of the other activities, or were helped with a lot of the other activities, and it really helped to have a very smooth start of the company, and we could immediately start doing work.
Yes, no, absolutely, and those few months that it saves at the beginning are invaluable, right? Because because the challenge is the clock is always ticking, or the bank account is always losing money. So time is of the essence in biotech, right? So the sooner you can deliver on something, the closer you are, right, to getting a new valuation, to getting more money into the company. Because as soon as the bank account hits zero, right, you're done. So So you came into it sort of not having had a sort of burning desire to start a business or anything like that, but there was the right project and it made sense, and so you decided to take that step. I'm sure you had some preconceptions about what running a company was going to be like and building a company, and probably some things that you didn't have any idea what it was going to be like. I'm always interested in what have been the things, either in those early days or kind of along the path since then, that have been most surprising about building a biotech company, or most challenging, or, what things have you gone through that you didn't expect on this journey so far?
Well, I think what helped me is I had a very good understanding how drug development looks like.
Yes.
Maybe mostly about actually the status of the molecule we had. So we had a pretty advanced molecule that wouldn't take too much to take it into the clinic. Mm-hmm. A lot of work had already been done by Merck, and we could access all that data. So we knew exactly what to do with that molecule. There's from that angle, from developing that molecule, I think we were pretty comfortable that we would be able to manage that. And exactly, Catherine was also very successful in hiring other people with additional skill set to support that going forward. But what I underestimated a bit is we, of course, saw that we had a great story. But then again, you then also need to sell that story to investors. And there, I think, we were maybe a little bit too naive. And then it turns out that, although everybody, in all the discussions we had with a lot of investors, they always complimented us as being a great team and whatever, but they didn't like the molecule. They didn't like the target. So what we saw as a potential in this target was not broadly seen, because the challenge I think we had with this target, and actually it applies to the other targets in our pipeline as well to some extent, is these are relatively older mechanisms that other people have already tried. We just think that they might not have had the right molecules, they might not have done it right, or there's now new information actually that helps us actually to do it better, smarter. But there is a kind of a dark cloud over some of these targets, and to get people to see it differently, that's difficult. If there is a kind of idea that these targets are not were not successful, or they're toxic, or it's very difficult to sway that opinion, and then it's easier for investors to embark on something that is highly novel, which nobody knows about, which has other risks, right? But unknown risks. So unknown risks seems to be easier to accept than known risks, which is, in my idea, actually pretty paradoxical, actually.
Yeah.
But, okay.
And I've not thought about it that way around, but you're absolutely right. It's kind of, the idea that this person's tried it before. Okay, well then we know not to do that. And we know not to do this, and we know not to. So there's only a few paths that we can take, right? So we just have to figure out which of those to take, rather than having this big open landscape in front of you where you could go anywhere and anything could be out there.
I must admit, so I think we have seen all the investors in Europe, more or less. I think we're now very happy. So we got a great syndicate for our Series B. So we're on our way now. I think we were also thinking it would be easier to tap into, let's say, US money. But as a European biotech, this is difficult because I think the US investors, they don't really understand the European system. They don't understand that if you run a clinical trial in Europe, it's at the same type of quality levels as you would do it in the US. Right. Yeah. So I think the US investors are really looking for US companies, or at least FDA approved molecules before they make the investment. So this is also what we're working on, is improving our presence in the US, including the US in our clinical studies. I think also there we had hoped, or we were anticipating would be easier to get US investors on board. It turns out to be that's a tougher nut to crack.
Yeah, and I suppose there comes a point. I mean, you're running multiple phase 2 studies at the moment, as you said, which has a certain amount of cost to it. As those advance and you move into phase 3, then unlocking that level of capital in Europe becomes much more difficult, right?
Exactly. For that, because the biggest pharmaceutical market is the US, so you need to be there, and yes, you need their money actually to fund those bigger trials.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then you said right back at the sort of start of the interview that, and the way you said this made me think that it's probably changed for you. You said you particularly got interested in, you didn't want to be a doctor because back then you weren't that interested in people, and it was the back then made me think that that's probably changed. So
yeah. So I think it's probably comes with age. So hopefully you become a little bit wiser, a little bit, and in the end, I think it can be very rewarding working with people. And actually, if you hear anecdotally, at least from our investigators, how patients are doing on our trials, right? So that's why I started doing this. So if you hear people saying anecdotally, right, that without your drug, right, I wouldn't be there. So we have patients still on our drug for over 4 years.
Yes.
And they're convinced that the reason they're still there is because they were on our trial. So I think this is extremely rewarding. So if this only applies to a handful of people, I think it's already has been a very successful endeavor. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you're right. As you get older, you think more about, well, what's the impact I've had? What mark am I leaving? What difference am I making? That sort of stuff, right? Whereas when you're young, it's all about you a lot of the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So you touched on sort of a lot of the things. You said you learned a lot going through bigger companies because, scientifically there was lots to learn. There was lots of opportunity to learn about other elements of being successful and leadership and project management and all those things. What would you say, since starting iOnctura, what would you say have been the most important things that you've learned or you've developed in yourself?
Well, I think if I go back in my career, I think what really helped me, I think, to grow as a professional, but also personally. So I had two very good bosses, or let's say people I worked with. So so at Organon, I had a very inspiring department head, which could really tell great stories, right? So he was really a PowerPoint wizard, right? He could really tell a story. Everybody would admire him and stay, and would be extremely inspired by him. That really helped me to get more to the bigger picture, right? So to make sure that you can translate your very specific, your very dedicated, detailed work, you need to be able to sell this for a bigger audience. You need to make sure you're trying to message this better. So this is what he really learned me. And then at Boehringer, I also had a very good project leader, and actually with him we had very in-depth discussions, not only about the chemistry, right, but also so he really also opened my mind, right, to be open to to what you're seeing, to be analytical, to inspect the unexpected, and not to be satisfied too easily, but also how to run a project. Because I think the biggest lesson he learned me is always have plan B ready, right? Because you never know what happened. But if you don't have plan B, you're done.
Yes.
Right? So and that applies to a lot of things. So I think that's really a good lesson. But also what I would advise people is try to find people in your early jobs, right? Find people that inspire you, because that helps to get the best out of you, right? And to grow yourself as a person. Doesn't necessarily need to be your direct manager. It can be somebody else in the organization. But always try to find somebody in an organization, or try to find an organization where there are people like that, where you can look up to, that inspire you, and that really make you, right, grow to that next level. Because I think if you cannot do it all by yourself. You need help, and you need people that that can assist and at least show you the way on how to do it. I think it's very important. So yeah, try to pick your boss. That's what I would advise people. Yeah.
And then how have you gone about sort of maintaining exposure to people playing at a higher level than you as you've moved into a founder position? Because it's kind of easier when you're in a corporate structure, right? There are people above you, and you can, when you're running your own company, you've got to try a bit harder, I think, to find ways to connect with those people.
Yeah, exactly. So especially in the early days, we were a lot on the road trying to find investors. Of course, there's a lot of dedicated conferences you go to where you have these one-on-one, right? This speed dating type of interviews. I must say that is extremely tiring, I must say. But yes, it helps. It helps to sharpen your story. It helps you to be more comfortable to talk to these people and have those interactions. I think now we are getting a little bit more mature. So those jobs are not only now for me and Catherine to do.
Yeah.
I think there's now, especially now we have clinical assets. It's now more about our medics to go out there and tell the data and discuss with other medics how the data looks like. So, but yes, you need to be comfortable to get out of your comfort zone and have those discussions and be open. But I must say, I think it also really helps if you work so if you're a scientist, I think you're very locked up in your science, in your thing. Right. If you go in a bigger company in the more general departments, right, you automatically need to do more of that. You need to better sell what you're doing because you might end up in a department that in the next reorganization is dissolved because somebody has an idea that we don't need it anymore. So you need to be much better connected. So I think that's also what I learned at Merck. And as an alliance manager, I think you had the advantage that naturally you were much more connected to other departments and you get a good sense of what's going on in the company. You learn a lot, but you also can work on networks and also show who you are, what you're able to do, and what you're capable of.
Yes.
Because I think that's typically also a little bit the limitation of a scientist. People don't see the other skills, the other capabilities you have. They typically see you as a scientist.
Right.
And judge you on what you deliver, not on the person you are. And I think in other functions, right, it's more about also who you are and how you interact with people.
Yeah. Yeah, and increasingly as you go through your career, right, you develop yourself technically to a point, and then it's not so much about learning things, it's about developing yourself and your approach and your characteristics and your perspective and all those kinds of things. You can always learn new skills as well. I think, that continues, but yeah, absolutely. No, it's fascinating. And so lots going on for you at the moment. Multiple clinical studies, multiple phase 2 studies, things moving forward. You closed your Series B, lots to be excited about. What is most exciting for you at the moment? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, for us now, most exciting is with these phase 2 studies starting. I think within the next 12 months, we will know if our lead molecule will deliver on its promise. Right. So that's extremely exciting. So are we? Did we place the right bets and did we select the right things to do?
Yes.
And does the molecule perform as we all hope, expect it will do? And if it does, I think then we're very close to having a very successful project, and we really need to accelerate again and try to bring this molecule then to the market to really get this available to the overall global patient population we're targeting. So it's going to be extremely nerve-wracking the next 12 months when we see the first data coming in. The good thing is it's not blinded trials, so we will see the data as it evolves. Okay. So we will know early on if things hold up or not. If not, I think it will be very exciting as well, because then we need to work on our plan B and see actually. So what is it then that we're going to do? So actually, it's also of course what we're now looking for is, can we further advance the other molecules in our portfolio? Can we also bring those to a point where they can demonstrate value for patients?
No, absolutely. Well, we have our fingers crossed for you, Lars, and
Thanks,
I hope
Tom.
it's a very positive year. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to chat.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.